What do we think of Spencer Stastney's new deal? What is Yaroslav Askarov's trade value? And which player is poised to have a standout season? You've got questions. We've got answers on today's Mailbag episode of the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us each and every day. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Nashville Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, Emma and I are tackling a plethora of topics that came in from you, our listeners. We are kicking off a mailbag episode. It's probably going to be part one because you all had a lot of questions. A lot going on this offseason, plenty of questions about the team going into next season. We are going to talk about Yaroslav Askarov and his trade value. We're going to talk about the new coaches added to the staff and what player is going to have a standout season. Before we dive into all of that good stuff, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsin' like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Emma, lots of questions going on with our listeners when it comes to the Nashville Predators, but do want to kick off because yesterday afternoon, news broke. Elliotte Friedman talked about the results of Spencer Stastney's arbitration ruling, and this is how it landed. So it is a 2-year deal. In 2024-25, it is a two-way deal. $825K at the NHL level, $400K at the AHL level. In 2025-26, it becomes a one-way deal, $850,000 salary. So kind of walk me through how you feel like this arbitration went, and how do you feel about the results of this?
I like this. I like it a lot for the Predators. I think it's a good deal for the Predators because they get Stasney for 2 years at under $900K, and he was asking for 1 year at $950.
Right.
So I think that meets the Predators where they're at. And then at the same time, it's a nice kind of compromise between the one way and the two way. Because the team wanted 2 years two way. Player wanted 1 year one way, and so this is kind of a nice meet in the middle where it'll be next season will be kind of, this is your two way. Okay, prove it. Like, you wanted a one way deal, prove it. And then the following season, one way. And then after that, because again, we've talked about this before. We agree here at Locked On Spencer Stastney that he is ready to be a full-time NHL defenseman, but in fairness, he hasn't been one yet. And so, they do kind of want to, I think that's probably where the arbitrator, I still haven't learned the word.
I don't know which word that is. So we're just going to say the guy in charge or woman in charge.
Yeah. The gender neutral person in charge.
Preach it.
Decided that this was kind of a good meet in the middle, and I agree. Again, I think that it kind of, people are saying, I've seen some reactions that are a little extreme where it's like, oh, this is a steal for Nashville and it's a huge L for Stastney, and I don't think it is. I do think it's a good deal for Nashville, but I think Stastney comes out net positive from this as well.
Right. Yeah, you look at Nashville when they were talking about the AHL salary, they had originally said, 125 the first year, 175 the second year. Well, it's 400,000 in the AHL. So, that shows like, yes, this is somebody who has proven what he can do in the AHL. I was very curious to see what they would do with the one-way, two-way. That for me was a bigger question than the money. And I agree with you. I think it's very interesting that they landed on 1 year of two-way and then the second year a one-way deal. And I do think whether Stasney likes it or not, he is set up for success with that, being that way, so I feel like for somebody who had a lot to take into consideration, this gender neutral arbiter person who made the decision really kind of found a good middle ground. I don't think it was a big L for Stasney. I do think it worked out well for Nashville. And again, I come back to like, let's hope that this is all done, wrapped up, no comments were made that maybe we don't want hurt feelings. We need Spencer Stastney alive, well, excited, playing on the blue line, ready to do taxes. Like that's
Yes.
where we need him. So kind of an interesting resolution to that situation now. Time to move on and see how they use him next season and where he plays next season with this two-way deal. We did get a great question, and it's something that maybe we haven't talked about a ton, asking for a rundown on the new coaching staff additions. And of course, want to talk about Darby Hendrickson, but I do want to tease something because coming up next Monday, we have a crossover episode with Locked On Wild, where Darby Hendrickson was on staff for 14 years, which is like dog years when it comes to coaching staff tenure in the NHL. And so Seth Topol spent quite a bit of time talking to me about Hendrickson and his tenure with the Wild and kind of behind the scenes look at him. But just overall, Emma, what is your takeaway when you look at the Darby Hendrickson signing for Nashville coming in as an assistant coach under Andrew Brunette?
I mean, I think we kind of touched on it when we talked about Dan Hinote's departure. I think it's just a chance for Andrew Brunette to get another one of his guys in there, which he's earned the right to do. And so I think that, it's, I mean, I'll be honest, you don't know much about assistant coaches and throughout the NHL, but obviously he had staying power. Like you said, 14 years with one organization is unheard of, I feel like. And I think that, it'll be good for Brunette to get another guy in there who's, like-minded and understands the system that he's trying to implement, and someone he believes that can really connect with the players. And I think, I'm excited to see how it goes, especially with obviously the penalty kill was an area that Dan Hinote was in charge of that could use some work. And so I would like to see how that improves this year as well.
Yeah. And of course, this is one of those situations where it's like, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in the sense that he and Andrew Brunette played together. He and Andrew Brunette were behind the bench as assistant coaches. He served under Todd Richards when Todd Richards had a very brief tenure as the head coach in Minnesota as well. So again, a lot of connections. This is somebody Andrew Brunette knows very well. I think probably very similar styles of play. Seth did say that sort of the role that he filled in Minnesota that he was best known for was that player connection piece, and very similar to what we hear, in the locker room from players about Dan Hinote. That was one of the coaches' names you always heard from players is like, hey, I was talking to Danny and this and that. And so I do think Darby Hendrickson is going to come in and sort of fill that role that really was a big loss, I think, for the Predators when they did not opt to re-sign Dan Hinote. So I think it'll be good to see him building those relationships. The other hiring that I think is really interesting is Mitch Korn. Mitch Korn hired as the director of goaltending. He is going to be overseeing the whole goaltending conglomerate. And again, this is another 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. He was Nashville's first goaltending coach, has worked with Barry Trotz for like 16 years. He hired Ben Vanderklok, which I was like, well done, Mitch Korn. Spent time with Trotz in Washington with the New York Islanders. This is a guy who knows how to develop goaltenders. We're talking about Dominik Hasek, of course, Pecorine, Ilya Sorokin. Goalies who have played under him, they've won 5 Vezinas and 2 Hart trophies. Welcome back to Nashville, Mitch.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Not a bad resume.
Yeah, and I think kind of a question that people have had, and I myself have even had, is like, okay, well, what's a director of goaltending? Like, what does that mean in terms of like how much interaction is he going to have day to day, with the NHL guys versus the prospects? Is he really like, is it going to be hands-on? There are a lot of kind of questions around that. But I think from what we've seen in like a pretty short span is that he has been pretty hands-on already. I mean, he was on the ice at development camp the whole week working with the goalie prospects there. When Scott Wedgwood was here in Nashville doing his media availability, he mentioned that he had already talked to him on the phone and like immediately when he signed. And so I think that, he's going to be very hands-on. And I think that's something, and I've written about this before because I'm just so impressed with the Predators goaltending, like goalie coaching staff, or
It's
as we
incredible.
internally, when I worked at the Preds, we referred to them as the Department of Goaltending Excellence, because they really, and kind of like what you said with Mitch Korn hiring Ben Vanderklok, well done. Ben Vanderklok before last season went and hired Jason Barron, who is the
Right.
goalie coach with the Admirals. Jay had been a student of Benny's for years. Like, he's known him since he was a kid. And now, so he knows, it's almost like they share a brain. And I feel like Mitch Korn and Benny are the same way too. So and then obviously you have Pekka in the mix now as a development coach and scout. And all of those guys, it's like they just get it. Like they keep it in the family, and they know how to communicate and how to connect with each other and how to connect with other goalies and with prospects and NHL level goalies. And so I think even talking to Scott Wedgwood, he's by all, by any means, he's developed. Like, he's in
Right.
the NHL. He does not need to develop anymore. But even he sounded excited to be working with these guys. Like, it's like you have access to their brains and you can just pick their brains all the time. And they are very hands-on, I think. And so that was kind of a question about Mitch Korn, and it's like, okay, that's his title, but what is he going to do? And I think that we've already seen that he's going to be very involved, which I think is only positive for all the Predators goalies.
Absolutely. And the one who I think is going to benefit tremendously from this addition is going to be Yaroslav Askarov. And I think the timing of bringing Mitch Korn back in is really interesting when it comes to what is next for Yaroslav Askarov. Coming up, we're going to talk about Askarov. We're going to tell you also who we think may have a standout season in gold. Want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports. We love them so much that we never want them to stop. But as the NHL playoffs have wrapped up, we're getting fewer and fewer sports. And the sports, they aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open their app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Emma, we were just talking about Mitch Korn and hands-on with the goaltenders. And of course, the goaltender that a lot of people are talking about now that UC Saros is signed is Yaroslav Askarov. And one of the questions that we got was, what is Yaroslav Askarov's trade value? And this question, to me, you can come at it from a couple of different directions. Because just like I said with UC Saros, yes, he's got trade value. But just because somebody has value as a trade piece doesn't mean you want to get rid of them. And I know everybody feels like it's a foregone conclusion when they signed Scott Wedgwood to this deal that Yaroslav Askarov is going to be traded. Do you really think that's a foregone conclusion?
No.
Thank you.
I have been, believe me, I have been banging the drum for the last 2 years and no one wants to listen to me. But
I do.
thank you, Anne. Signing these older players, I don't mean old, just older than 22 old Askarov is it's not, and people, I see this a lot from fans who are upset, even questioning bringing in like Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, Luke Shen, people like that. They're like, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to get younger. Why are we signing these old guys? And it's like, okay, signing older veterans does not block those prospects from roster spots. It buys them time. It buys them time to keep developing and to be the best versions of themselves and actually earn those roster spots. Because believe me, if you think that whoever it is, like if Barry Trotz, Andrew Brunette, Ben Vanderklok, whoever, if they truly believed that Yaroslav Askarov was ready for a full-time NHL role, they don't go sign Scott Wedgwood.
Absolutely.
Like, he's not blocking a roster spot from him. He is buying him time because these guys are, and I will loop in guys like Joachim Kemmel, Zach LaRue, etc. These guys in Milwaukee who are amazing talents and will be big impact players at the NHL level someday are not there yet. And that's okay because the organization has now just bought them time. And maybe, I think when the Predators, it kind of looked 2 seasons ago like they may be in sell-off mode. I think the fans kind of got this mindset of like, all right, bring up all the kids. Let's see what they can do. And it's like, well, that was more, they did that out of necessity 2 years ago because everyone got hurt. And that's actually not the situation that we want. So I could go on this tangent. I already sort of have. But the point is that I think Askarov, it is not a foregone conclusion that he is being traded. I've also seen the argument a lot that he is, trade him now because his trade value is only going to diminish. And I really don't think that's true because, I mean, if anything, it's going to increase because you're going to get him, he's now had 2 seasons, 2 very strong regular seasons at the AHL level. He's now, in theory, he'll have a 3rd one. And then maybe this time he can hold on to the starter's net in the playoffs.
Right.
And then his value just increases because right now I would say his trade value might be, I would argue, the lowest it's ever been because it's now out there that, as a potential, he's a trade chip. He's someone who could be on the trade block. And now that now that other teams know that, other GMs know that, they're going to try to maybe lowball Barry Trotz or whatever it is. And I think that, again, coming off 2 back-to-back seasons where he's lost his starter's net in the playoffs, it's not, his value can certainly go up. And I think it will. And, when it comes to the price, again, it's like UC Saros. I don't think Barry Trotz ever had an intention of trading Saros. But you answer the phone, you take the phone call.
Do your due diligence, you bet.
Because David Poyle talked about that with the Shea Weber trade. He wasn't necessarily looking to trade Shea Weber until Montreal called him and said, "Hey, we'll give you PK Subban." And then it's like, huh, okay. So sometimes you don't know what teams are going to offer you. So you take the phone call. And so I think that's kind of where Barry Trotz and the Predators are at right now. There's no rush to move him. And I think that, it's the bar, the bottom, the baseline for an Askarov trade. It has to start, if we're even going to have a conversation, the return has to start with either a very high level prospect, forward prospect,
Right.
or a proven NHL talent, because now that the Predators have made these moves in the offseason, they have officially sent the message, all right, we're trying to win right now. So they're not going to be looking for prospects that won't help them for 2 to 3 more years.
Absolutely.
So it's got to start with those NHL level talents. And I think that kind of limits your pool of potential trade partners, because there are certain teams that at this point in the off season, no one is really in full sell mode right now because it's the off season. Like you really won't know which teams are in a position to want to part with assets like that until probably the deadline or the end of
Right.
next season. And so I don't see Askarov getting moved this offseason. It just doesn't make sense to me. I may not see him getting moved at all, frankly, but definitely not this early.
Yeah. And I even think I agree with you about this offseason. And I even think at the trade deadline, I'm not sure that he is a piece Nashville would part with unless they were 100% sure this was the deep cup run team, because this team and the big stars that they signed are going to be here in 25, 26. So you don't have it. This is not your only season window.
Right.
And I think you have to be really careful with Yaroslav Askarov, because I do think he is the piece they're counting on in 2 years. We talked about Mitch Korn and Barry Trotz said, look, I called Yaroslav Askarov and his agent, and we talked about what I'm seeing. And I wonder if maybe, this is pure speculation, part of that conversation was stick around for 2 years, let this guy work with you, and then you are going to be much more ready for the NHL here in Nashville. I did see somebody ask, and I did want to address this one very specifically. Would San Jose consider trading Celebrini for Yaroslav Askarov? And this is what I will say. Wouldn't that be nice? But absolutely not. Because San Jose is building their team around Macklin Celebrini. He is who they are building it around. And you're going to build your team around that dynamic goal scoring forward way before you're going to build it around a Tums inducing, but really high talent goaltender in net. So that's one that I just don't see. As much as Yaroslav Askarov would be a great get for a team that's kind of in the situation that San Jose is in, that's just not one that I think San Jose would even entertain.
Yeah. No, it wouldn't make sense for them. It would make sense for Nashville for sure.
Nashville would love that.
Yeah,
Look,
but
100%. But yeah, San Jose, that would be one of the shortest conversations Barry Trotz has.
well, yes. And one thing I want to hop back to really briefly before we move on. You mentioned that, you wonder if part of that conversation with Yaroslav Askarov was, hey, you're going to work with Mitch Korn. I kind of wonder too if, and maybe this is just me being a little more cynical, but I kind of wonder if any of that is, again, this is pure speculation. I have no reporting here, but maybe it's Barry Trotz saying, hey, Mitch, go get a look at this guy. Go spend some time with him. Tell us what you think. Like, is he a key piece of our future? Like, is he a key part of this organization's future, or should we cut bait? Like, again, I don't know if it would be that abrupt, but I mean, I think, obviously Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette, they see what they see from Askarov, and they get reports from Jason Barron and from Carl Taylor and the guys in Milwaukee, but they're not there with him on a day-to-day basis, and they don't know what they don't know. So I feel like Mitch Korn could honestly be another set of eyes that could help them kind of decide what they want to do with him going forward.
That's a great thought. Absolutely. And like you say, that information could inform what Barry Trotz does decide to do with Yaroslav Askarov, because if you get somebody like Mitch Korn with eyes on him, that's going to be a very accurate assessment. You're going to get a very good picture of from somebody who has developed tons of goaltenders in the NHL, of what this kid's ceiling is and what it's going to take to get there. That's a great point. Coming up, we are going to talk about some other players who we think, and who our Locked On Predators insiders think, could be standout players. All right. So we posed our question, of course, to all of our listeners, but we also sent out a message to our Locked On Predators insiders. This is our insider program. It's via subtext. Anyone can join, and it's just a way to connect more directly with Emma and I after the podcast. Questions, comments, thoughts. And so we went to our insiders and we said, what are your questions? And our insider at 77 Preds came back with a great one. This is one that I love talking about. Which Predators player do you think will have a breakout season or a standout season? So we took that question and we went right back to our insiders and we're like, hey, y'all, tell us who you think could have this. So we're going to tell you their answers and talk about that. Of course, I immediately turned it right back around on 77 Preds and said, okay, great question. Who do you think? Her answer, and I got to tell you, I love this answer, and I think this could really be true. Luke Evangelista.
See, I was gonna, with a name like 77 Preds, it's got to be Evangelista, right?
Let's go.
Honestly, that was my initial thought when you asked that question. I was like, we saw little flashes of it, and it was last year, and we saw at least, like, for me, the biggest thing for me, like, his numbers from last season didn't exactly jump off the page at you, but it was, in watching him, I could see his confidence growing throughout the year. And that is so important, I think, when it comes to, a player who is expected to play a role like he is. And I think there were so many times, even during the playoffs, honestly, he had a good playoffs. And I think that there were so many times where I just found myself like, man, if they could just get him with a playmaking center, like someone who can get him the puck. And I think that we saw it could be. And now they have these new pieces, and maybe that'll help unlock a new side of his game, or not even a new side, just fully unlock his potential. Because I think he's right there. He is right there.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think so much is going to come down to what does Andrew Brunette do with that second line? Because, in theory, they're going to keep top line together. And then the second line, you're looking at like Stamkos and Marchessault. But if you move Stamkos to center and put Luke Evangelista there, that is pretty boy Vincenzo land right there. Another person answered with Tommy Novak. And I have to tell you, I wasn't 100% on board with this. And then again, was going through hockey withdrawal, rewatched a bunch of highlights from last season. And if they opt to keep Stamkos on the wing and put Tommy Novak in there, I think we could see some things from Tommy Novak. I forgot, because he was so quiet in the postseason, I forgot what we saw from him in the regular season at times.
And you know what? I think a lot of other people forgot too, because the backlash I was seeing on social media, and I'm not going to sit here and argue that Tommy Novak had a good playoffs. No, he had a terrible playoffs. Like, I'm not arguing that.
Right.
But you can have a bad playoffs, but like, you can have bad playoffs and still be a good player. I mean, look at who had a good playoffs. Luke Shen. Sorry, he did not have the best regular season. I think we can all agree on that. So like we can't overreact to one playoff series. And I think people, I understand it all kind of, you get tunnel vision sometimes, but like
Right.
that I do agree that the playoffs, that one playoff series illuminated some issues or some areas where he needs to improve. For example, I certainly hope he is living in the gym this summer.
Right.
But I think that he has so much just raw ability. He's so good with the puck. He's a good
Yes.
skater. He has great hands. Like he's got a lot of elements that you want in that second line center. And I think it's just like again, if you can just get him to that next level, kind of like Evangelista, he's almost there. And
Right.
I would think though, like honestly, Evangelista, his confidence is there. I would like to get Tommy Novak's confidence to that level.
Yeah. It's very hard to get your confidence to Luke Evangelista level.
It's true.
But God love him. This was another answer that I loved and wanted to share this one and get your take on this. Roman Josi. This may be a hot take. This is what one of our insiders said. This may be a hot take, but Roman Josi will be the standout player and should probably win the Norris next year. Year 2 in a new system, and Trotz added 2 more 40 goal scorers, giving him the best supporting cast he's ever had. I mean, come on.
I don't think that's that spicy of a take, to be honest. I think Roman Josi is the definition of getting better with age. I mean, like
Gosh,
his
yes.
last 2 seasons or 2 of his last 3 seasons have been the best of his career. And he's 34 years old. And so I still truly believe that Roman Josi has at least 2 more years of elite level hockey in him. And then beyond that, I think he'd still have 2 to 3 more good years, like pretty good years. But he's at that elite level and he has shown 0 signs of slowing down. So I don't think that's a spicy take at all. I mean, he ages like fine wine. And I think that, we're going to see that.
Yeah, I loved that take. I thought, that people are so busy looking at these new additions, and I'm like, Roman Josi, he may shock you. Here's an under the radar pick, 100% here for my friends. Let's talk about, and I can't believe I'm going to say it, Big Sexy. I feel uncomfortable. Michael McCarron.
Your favorite. But why?
I love him.
Listen, why would you want to be called Big Sexy when you can be called Viscount Chihuahua? I will never
100%.
understand. Or Mr.
Like-
Potato Head for that matter.
Yes, maybe we'll just stick with Michael McCarron because Big Sexy does not compete and it makes me feel uncomfortable.
I'm going to be honest with you. I did have that passing thought about Michael McCarron.
Yeah.
Purely because, well, number one, we saw the impact that he and his line had on this team. And we've talked about that enough. We don't need to rehash all of that. But I think he's going to get the dad strength. I think he's going to get a little boost. He's becoming a dad this year. I think
he's girl dad, baby.
Yeah. And while we're at it, look out for Philip Forsberg too. Same reason.
Oh, I know. I really was like Michael McCarron, not a name people are going to talk about as a standout player, but this insider pointed out, look, he's a former first round pick. Like, let's not forget Michael McCarron, first round pick. He has shown flashes of being able to score. He is an enforcer when the Preds need it. I think he is really growing into a leadership role in the locker room.
Yep.
I don't know. Keep your eye on Michael McCarron, y'all.
Yeah. I think it's funny. You talk about him being a former first round pick. I do think it's funny every time Montreal comes to town or when we would go to Montreal, that's the biggest media scrum you will ever see around Michael McCarron all season because Montreal's the team that drafted him first overall. And it's like, you never, I mean, no disrespect to the guy, but he'll tell you the same that no one ever wants to talk to him until we play Montreal. And then all of a sudden everyone wants to talk to him. So, I mean, he's still like, he is a first round pick. Like he
Yeah.
was a first round pick for a reason. And he, like you said, he's definitely growing into a leadership role. And a lot of his teammates have noted that as well, as that he's kind of one of those big secondary leaders in the locker room.
Absolutely. Yep. He is, as we say here at Locked On Predators, a good egg.
Yes.
He is a good egg. Well, we have more questions that we're going to tackle in tomorrow's episode, part 2, Locked On Predators Mailbag. So be sure you tune in to hear those questions and answers as well. Before we sign off, though, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and where they can find your work.
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at ANK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. Be sure that you're following the podcast, LO_Predators, on social media. Of course, you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and we are on YouTube as well. Thank you for making this episode your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with more mailbag questions and answers. We'll see you then.